Good afternoon, everyone. I am truly honored that members of our college community are here today as we heighten our awareness and respect to the veterans who have served our nation well, and for the families who are the foundation, the rock of so many of our veterans. I'm delighted that we are in the final stages of hiring our military veterans navigator to help make the transition to higher education smooth, more welcoming, and beneficial for our student veterans, our active duty members, and their families. Student success remains our mission. I can't help but think of some of the outcomes of what you see today may be routed in the wisdom of Brigadier General Joshua Chamberlain, who held Little Round Top during the Battle of Gettysburg, when he concluded, and I quote, "Let me say no danger and no hardship ever makes me wish to get back to that college life again," unquote. Sort of surprising when you think this is coming from a professor and a veteran. And it also gives us some idea of the challenges that we face today and how we are striving to make the journey better for all of our students. And as we progress through this semester, to everybody online and in person, our goal is to see you all at commencement. So carry on. We appreciate your presence here, and we want to do what it takes to make your education at Cape Cod Community College.
Great. Well, Josh gets our keynote speaker tuned up. Thank you for being here. We do have some light lunch over here. Help yourself. We have some other information in the back, but we're glad that you're here. And Micaela Black is joining us from the VetSuccess program. She works for the VA and is housed on the campus of CCRI.
Hi, everyone. Sorry that I'm not there in person. That would have been my preference. I know we can do this stuff virtually, but I do prefer to be in person. So bear with me. It's a little bit of PowerPoint, but I'm going to, kind of skip over some things pretty quickly. This presentation is something I've done at various campuses. I am actually co-located with the VetSuccess on Campus program at the Community College of Rhode Island and Rhode Island College. But because Rhode Island's small, I pretty much cover the whole state. So I have the pleasure of working with all the colleges and universities in Rhode Island, and then even in Massachusetts, as this collaboration shows today. It's really about supporting student veterans, understanding student veterans a little better. A little bit about my program. It was created back in 2009 in response to the post 9/11 GI Bill rolling out and many student veterans heading to campus to use their earned benefits. The VA created a partnership between the VA and the schools called VetSuccess on Campus. And I'm not going to read all these services to you, but the idea was to go on campus and really just find out what the student veterans needed, find out how to help the schools better provide that, and really ease the transition out of the military onto the college campuses, navigating the school process, ultimately leading to graduation and then next step career. So it's been a great program. I've been happy to be part of it since the beginning, and I love doing this sort of stuff to help other schools either start up a program or better build a program so that faculty and staff have a better understanding of where to support our student vets. So I usually break this up into two parts. Part one is sort of a little bit of background on just general military culture and some of the reintegration challenges. What I've found over the years in doing these presentations is that part two, which is a little more technical, sort of where are the struggles, how do we help, best practices, part two makes more sense. And I think that individuals are more invested in part two when they understand part one a little bit better. So that you have an understanding of where the veterans are coming from, their experience maybe in transitioning to the college campus, then helps us better assist them in the process to be successful throughout. So this understanding our military culture, it's pretty basic, but it's not intended to say that people don't know, that there's multiple branches of the military. Of course, I understand that anybody in the audience would know this. But what I put in parentheses is the part that maybe gets lost when you're not directly connected to the military, meaning you didn't serve yourself or you don't have a family member that served. So there's a name for each, not everyone is a soldier, and believe it or not, it is sort of offensive to call a Marine a soldier. So it matters to them, and therefore it should matter to us. The catch-all phrase for for all of the military would be service members. And again, I bring this up because for the most part, the military makes up a very small population of the country. And as I'll show you in the next couple of slides, it has gotten smaller over the years as well. So there are some of us, perhaps in the room, that don't even have a direct connection to anybody in the military, maybe not a family member, they haven't served themselves. So just by nature, there's a disconnect, and you might not even think of these things. But when you start working with the military population or want to do better in terms of connecting and understanding, these little things tend to matter. So you probably know this too, that as soon as an individual signs up to join the service, they all complete basic training. Now, depending on the branch, the length of basic training and where you go will vary, but the general premise of it is the same. And it's essentially, they're being stripped down of their individuality and built up together as a team, as a unit, as a cohesive model. And there's, if you think about the military and its purpose and the missions they go on and the things that they do, that all makes perfect sense. But what I like to point out on the college campuses is that's traditionally the opposite. It's sort of a time when traditional high school students are coming out of high school and entering college. And it's a time for them to, be free thinkers and very individual and, come up with your own ideas and go against the grain. So it's a bit of a culture shock to leave the military in general. But to leave the military and perhaps very quickly join a college campus, it's almost like a double culture shock because of the military mentality and that team cohesive unit mentality. That is not to say it's not important also on a college campus or anywhere in life, but it's a stark difference between sort of what the college mentality is. Military training is very structured. Again, this is not surprising. There's a lot of order. There's a hierarchy, which is very clear. And I can say, as someone who joined the higher ed world from the VA, I found the hierarchy confusing. There's deans of multiple schools, and there's not always a clear line of like, this is your first person to go to, this is your second person to go to. Can I even go to a department chair without talking to my professor? This is some stuff that people in the military will even grapple with because it's so clear in the military structure. Everything they're learning and being trained in is very mission focused, and it's taken quite seriously, as you can imagine. Everyone has a job, and they're really going to make sure they do that job, especially on, let's say, a combat deployment, because literally lives are at stake. So they take it all very seriously. And when they leave the military and come home or come back from a deployment, it's not like you just flip a switch and that conditioning goes away. You can't really do that. So here's a quote here. It's leaving the military isn't just leaving a job, it's leaving an actual way of life. In military training, and specifically combat related training, there's a reason why certain things would be valued and taught. And I could run down the list, but it's a lot of planning for and controlling things, because again, lives are at stake. There's very dangerous situations. You are taught to stuff down perhaps the fear or the angst or the concern. It's all, you just stay mission focused. And again, you can't just turn this stuff off. It's embedded in your operating mode now. There's a tremendous emphasis on respect and trust. And this is something that I'll often hear my vets comment on, that it doesn't feel the same in the civilian world. You can't find that type of brotherhood, that camaraderie that they felt within a unit where they knew they were responsible for each other's lives. And you can't just unlearn this. Again, if you know how to ride a bike, you know how to ride a bike. You can't really pretend you don't know how. So they can't really pretend that this is not now ingrained in them. This is a typical, like a morning meeting, let's say, before they go out on a mission. You'll notice that everyone's very attentive. I guarantee you nobody was late for this meeting. There's not going to be someone that raises their hand and says, hey, Sarge, I think we should go east because west was a little dicey yesterday, or I'm going to sit this one out. My ankle's really bothering me. I'll catch you guys later. Everyone's there. Everyone's listening. Everyone knows what they're going to do, and they're all going to follow orders because this is their job, and there's a lot at stake. So I bring that up because, if you're a faculty or staff, think about your last staff meeting. Is that how it went? Was everyone like super duper attentive and gave no pushback and sort of fell in line? Think about the college classrooms. Is that how they operate? Is there sometimes heated discussions that maybe get a little out of control? Are there students that come in late? Are there students that are on their cell phones, maybe, disrespectfully not paying attention? All of these things are noted by our military members because it is not acceptable, not allowed, and definitely there's the perception that it's disrespectful to not just the other students, but also the faculty, whoever's in charge. So again, a bit of a culture shift to go from this environment where everything is structured and you follow the rules and you do as they say and things are at stake versus this different environment that we have in a higher ed experience. This is one of my favorite slides. I always say I could spend an hour talking about just this slide. I won't, I promise. But if I were to cover up the one side of the slide, and I just showed you, the during deployment piece where it says cohesion and accountability and targeted aggression, you would probably say, hey, that's what we want in our military, right? We could say the same thing of our first responders, our police officers, and our firefighters. We want them to embody these characteristics, right? Because it keeps them safe and alive. It keeps the mission on target. It keeps those that are perhaps at risk safe as well. But if I covered up the during deployment slide and went to the at-home piece and I read that list, you'd probably look at that list and say it's more dysfunctional. So the very things that they are taught and need and use and characteristics that keep them safe and alive and are so important then can become dysfunctional when they return home, because it's not like just turning a switch off and saying, I'm home, I'm safe. These things are still embedded in them, ingrained in them. They kept them alive. So it turns into things like social withdrawal, controlling, inappropriate aggression, that hypervigilance, constantly on guard and aware of what's around them, guilt, aggressive driving. So these things that they needed can become dysfunctional on the other end. So it's important to realize that that's why, that's the shift. This was stuff that was very important at the time that they served and during their missions and combat exposures. Okay, so our local veteran population here in New England, we don't have a lot of active duty, which won't surprise many of you. We have just a few active duty posts. And also, again, the active duty and National Guard reservists have gotten smaller over the years, which really does matter. Again, it means that we're less connected too, because it means we have less family members that are perhaps serving in the military. But it also means there's a smaller percentage of the population who are bearing the responsibility of whatever falls on the military. And certainly we were in a conflict for many, many years with multiple deployments, back and forth, every deployment, more of a disruption to your daily life, more of a risk of being injured or coming back with mental health issues. So our active duty and our National Guard reservists is getting smaller, but in New England, we see here that we do not have a tremendous amount of active duty, but we have a ton of National Guard and reservists. And why does this matter? So again, I could spend a lot of time on this, but if you look at the picture at the top, it's a base. I'm told it's an Air Force base because it's pretty nice. So everyone who lives there is connected to the military. So if there's a unit that's deployed, your neighbor knows. Maybe your neighbor's husband or wife is also deployed. And then the picture at the bottom is just a neighborhood in Rhode Island. So your National Guard and reservists are perhaps being deployed, but they're your community members. It's your police officer. It's someone that maybe works on a college campus. It's someone that works at the grocery store. It's your real estate agent. They have regular jobs and then they just get plucked and pulled out and deployed. And maybe nobody knows. It's possible that their neighbor didn't even realize that they were perhaps deployed to Afghanistan a month ago. And the story I always share is a service member that I worked with who was in the National Guard, and he was part of a Massachusetts unit or a Rhode Island unit. But he had a particular military occupational specialty and he was deployed with a Connecticut unit. So he was even pulled from his Rhode Island unit and sent on a deployment with a Connecticut unit. He didn't know anyone. And he went to Afghanistan and then he flew back to Connecticut, rented a car and drove himself back to Rhode Island as if it was like a business trip to Houston, Texas. Within a 24-hour period, he had been in Afghanistan and now he was driving himself alone back to Rhode Island. So there's a lot of research that shows the adjustment is actually a little more difficult, and there's some more struggles for our Guard members and reservists who are being pulled onto active duty orders back and forth, back and forth. And if that's our population, a high number of National Guard and reservists, we need to be aware of that. So our post 9/11 era veterans also look a little bit different compared to previous wars. Excuse me. We do have more women, which makes sense. There's more women in the military now. They're a little bit older if we compare them to, say, the Vietnam era veterans. There are multiple deployments, which I just discussed. Many of them have deployed, over 40% have deployed more than once. And I've personally worked with Guard members who have deployed 6, 7, sometimes 8 or more times. And again, remember, every time they're deployed, it's being pulled from their life back and forth, disrupting the family situation, disrupting their employment, their schooling. There's a much higher, what we call wounded to kill ratio, meaning there's been medical advances. So where in past wars, someone would have, perhaps passed in the battlefield or during an IED blast, they now come home, but with significant injuries. And our Guard members and reservists, because the active duty component is smaller, they have been activated many, many more times than ever in the past. And perhaps, in many cases, that's not necessarily what they signed up for when they joined the Guard or Reserve. So what did we see in terms of, war zone stressors, or in response to when someone is deployed and they come back? What are some of the common difficulties? I'm not going to read through all of them, but if you just want to take a quick look and then think about if you had to deal with any of these, on a college campus, brand new to the college experience, brand new to the classroom, maybe been out of school for a little while and you're just re-engaging in college coursework, things like sleep difficulty, which is very common, concentration issues, even the hypervigilance we talked about before. That perception of disrespect, I kind of put that in a different color because I feel like that's important too. And we can talk a little bit more about that in later slides. But maybe you come up to the enrollment desk and there's something wrong and your application didn't go through, and then they send you to the bursar because there's something else wrong and there's a charge that shouldn't be there because you're using GI Bill, but there was a form that was missed. And so you're getting bounced around and it feels like, is anybody really helping me with this? I'm trying to use my benefits that I earned and it's all just a disaster and I can't even get registered for classes. So in many ways that hits a little harder because it's like they're using these benefits that they earned after this sometimes difficult experience that they had in the military. And now they're coming out and this is the next step and it's really not going well. And then the last one, I'll add not only war references, but right now everything's very politically charged. I don't think I've ever seen an environment quite like this. And that stuff absolutely comes up in the college classrooms. And then there's perhaps a different impact, or it's more of a trigger for some of our military members where it hits close to home. I'll give one example, the incident in Afghanistan with everything that happened, that really affected a lot of our service members, understandably. If you had been there and experienced deployment there, and then to see what happened with the withdrawal was very, very challenging, still is challenging for many of them. Again, this is sort of a picture of some of the mental health issues that we see. That some of them are ranges. I always point out the PTSD because that's sort of the signature. Post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury are sort of the signatures of this war. Certainly we do see PTSD, but we also have many, many veterans and service members that are not formally diagnosed with PTSD. So although it's between 5 and 25%, that's still a large percentage that don't fit that criteria. And then the other one that I point out is sleep disorders or insomnia disorders, because again, we can all relate to this. We've all had stretches of time, whether it was when you had small children where you didn't sleep well, or if anyone has insomnia themselves. If you're not sleeping well, it's sort of like everything else it's a trickle effect. Nothing else is really going well. There's a lot of irritability. It's like you're like a frayed rope. Everything is more difficult because of sleep issues. And this is so common among our service members. It's one of those questions when I'm training someone new that's working with veterans, I always encourage them to ask more questions about this, not just, are you sleeping okay? Because they might say yes to that. But then when you ask more, how many hours a night do you get? Maybe 2 to 3 hours at a time. Or I hardly sleep at night. I sleep more during the morning hours of the day. So these are common difficulties. And sometimes that's the thing that's a little easier for them to talk about, is the sleep difficulties, which can lead to opening up about some other things that might be going on as well. Obviously, physical problems can be an issue too. There's they're operating on difficult terrain. This is not like they're running on a track. They're on, mountains and hills and running and have backpacks. And so there's a lot of orthopedic injuries. I mention this because it does come up on the college campuses where you may have someone who served or who is a service member, and they might ask to sit in the back of the classroom because they need to stand occasionally due to a back injury and discomfort sitting for too long. They might have to leave the classroom, and that could be for physical or mental health issues. If there's some anxiety and they know that they're having a difficult day, it's important for them to know that they could leave the classroom, because again, they're conditioned to think that's not appropriate. You're in class, you sit in class, you listen. If they know that they can leave for a minute and take a walk, maybe go outside, get some air and come back, and that's acceptable because it's based on a medical reason, through the Disability Services Office, for example, that might mean the difference between showing up that day for class versus staying home because they had a bad night's sleep and they're having a bad day, or it's a particularly challenging time for them, an anniversary reminder, something like that. And then the other thing I usually mention is, in addition to the mental health stuff that can happen and the physical injuries, is this what we would call an inner conflict. And there's a lot of really interesting research on this moral injury. And I can definitely say that this is a piece that I see often in terms of sort of what I would call cognitive dissonance, like sort of flipping your world upside down now that you've been in these combat situations or military situations in general, where now your view of the world is that it isn't safe, or maybe you had to do things that you never thought you were even capable of. And what does that say about you? And feeling that, well, if I did that, if I was capable of that, I must be some sort of monster. And this is not unique to the current war. This is going back to really any war. I had the pleasure of working with World War II veterans in one of my first VA jobs, and this sentiment was there even for them. So it really does flip your script in terms of how you view the world, sometimes how you view yourself, and working through this can be often the most helpful piece of treatment. And ultimately it can lead to an identity change. Now this picture is a more blatant, obvious, he's lost his legs, he has 2 prosthetics. But sometimes it's not visible. It's an invisible identity change, but they're still grappling with what does it mean now? Where do I go now as this new person that I am, and what's next in my my civilian life now that I'm not in the military? And the impact is that they leave the military and they come into the civilian world, and it can often be challenging. There's that loss of camaraderie, like we said. There's that unit cohesion, that battle buddy. They don't feel that from the people, from civilians in the regular world like they did in their military unit. There's a lack of sense of purpose. There was so much that they were responsible for in the military. They had a mission, they were focused. I can't tell you how many of my veterans I've worked with that said they would rather go back to Iraq or Afghanistan, these really dangerous combat zone places, versus deal with the day-to-day muck of regular life, paying bills and the uncertainty and a job that they hate, or challenges on the college campus. It was easier when it was mission focused and they were with their buddies and everything was sort of, structured and organized. That was easier, believe it or not. So again, I won't read the whole list, but I do highlight the one on the bottom, where there's a sentiment that they feel their service time is not valued. What they did is not fully recognized. It's not appreciated. I usually bring up the thank you for your service sentiment, which not a bad thing. Certainly we mistreated the Vietnam era veterans. And if you've ever, the impact was awful, that, to have a combat experience and come back and then feel shamed and mistreated. So now, as a society, we think, well, no, we support the military, right? We say, thank you for your service. We put the bumper stickers on our car. But are we really truly embodying that sentiment? Is it thank you for your service, I got to get my coffee, thank you for your service, my plane's about to take off? Or is it thank you for your service, what branch were you? Did you deploy? Like taking a little bit of interest in their experience. Another example I always give is I worked with a veteran who had a pretty impressive military career. He was a combat medic. He was in for 8 years. He worked at Walter Reed, and he had been working with a career counselor on his resume. And they told him to take off his military experience, take it right off the resume, all of it. And I mean, I was horrified, and I know he was upset too, because that was a huge chunk of his life. He was very proud of it. He had done wonderful things. It was impressive. But the career counselor wasn't trying to be disrespectful. What she was saying is it's not as valued by the employers. They don't understand the language. So she was thinking she was giving him good advice in terms of having a better chance of getting a job. But really what it was saying is, we don't care about that. And I would say the same thing when they show up on the college campus and they submit their military transcript and they get, 5 credits for maybe 10 years in service. Is that really saying thank you? We value what you do? That they have difficulty finding a job despite their military experience because it doesn't neatly translate over, which is why many of them choose to get a college degree because their military experience isn't as valued. It doesn't show up on the resume looking impressive where it should, right? Or at least be recognized. So I get this question a lot. Sometimes it's from, staff members on campus, advisors that might say, geez, this guy just got out 2 weeks ago. Is he ready to come to college? And sometimes no, sometimes maybe it is a bit of a quick transition. But if you really think about it, it makes sense that that would be the next logical step for them. When they join the military, if they, took a traditional path and got out of high school and maybe joined right away, their peers often went to college while they were serving the country. So now they come out and they think, okay, well, next step is I should get a degree because I've earned these benefits by serving, so I might as well use them. Maybe I'm not highly employable with just my military experience, unfortunately. So I need to merge a degree with this experience in order to be more employable, especially in this Northeast region. There's a financial need because if you can't find a job, you can't support your family and you're now no longer getting payment by being in the active duty military. So there's a lot of different reasons that they might land on campus. What I want to point out here is they're putting a lot of eggs in that basket, that they have earned these benefits. They served the country and now they've got this, whether it's GI Bill or VR&E or, some other programs, they're putting those eggs in the basket saying this is the next step. And it's an important next step for what their civilian life will look like. So when it doesn't go well, it's a big deal. When they struggle, like I said a minute ago with the enrollment and bursar and financial aid, when that's all a big mess, or they get in classes and they're not supported and they're struggling and failing, and they decide, oh, I guess I can't do this college thing. Things don't get better if they drop out of college. They don't win the lottery. They don't often find a great job. This is where we see more problems with, and I can speak to this firsthand, relationship issues, financial issues, starting to have to sleep in their car or couch hop because they don't have anywhere to live, increase in substance use, increase in suicidal ideation. If all of this goes to crap, then it really is a problem and it leads to other bigger problems. So not to put a lot of pressure on the colleges, but I'm putting some pressure on the colleges. This is a big next step. And the more support we can give them to be successful in this next step, the better they are. The ones who I see that go through their college experience and are able to get the degree and find a job, it's so great to see them come back because they're generally doing well. They want to contribute. They want to have a meaningful career. They want to give back. They don't want to be sitting at home doing nothing. Even the ones that are perhaps, have a high service connected disability where they're paid, they might have 100% rating. They still want to work. And why wouldn't they? They want to be able to do something. So our student vet population is, it's mostly male because the military is still male dominated, but there is a higher percentage of female veterans who pursue college. The age range is generally our adult learners. So those of you in the room that work with adult learners, all the challenges that comes with in terms of being married and having children and more responsibility. And then about 30%, I would say higher, have some type of disability. I say higher because it's not often something that they disclose. And they are often hesitant to seek out something like disability services for accommodations. And we could talk about that as well. So in this last piece, and I'll try to leave room for questions so I don't take up too much time. How do we help? Where do they tend to struggle? And what do we do? What are some best practices to implement where we can be a little more helpful? So there's a lot of just the higher ed experience in general, particularly for maybe an adult learner who has, no one else that's gone to college, they're not coming out of high school, so they don't have that support system. The process is a little difficult. It's the community colleges make it easier, thank goodness, but applying and making sure you're submitting all the right paperwork and all the transcripts. And so there's some red tape, but then you're adding all the red tape that comes with VA benefits. And I work for the government, so I know there is some red tape. You're adding all that in as well. So it's two things that they have to perfectly merge together or else they don't get registered, they don't get paid, the benefits become a mess. So there's a lot of pressure. Being in the classroom can be difficult. Even my younger vets, and I say younger, like they're still in their 20s. Some of them, even the service members, guard members could be 19, 20. They still feel much older. They'll say, oh, I'm so old. I can't believe I'm going to be in campus, in classes with these young kids. And even your same age, if you take a 26-year-old individual who's served and been in combat situations, even their same age 26-year-old civilian peer, they're kind of light years apart. So there's still that disconnect because they've had very different experiences. There's a lot of insensitive comments that happen on the college campuses. I usually warn my vets that, you could be in class with an 18-year-old who doesn't know any better, and they might ask some insensitive questions. Just be ready. Like, what's your answer going to be if they ask some of those insensitive questions? And believe it or not, I've had faculty members ask equally as insensitive questions. I believe sometimes it's coming from a well-meaning place, wanting to connect and get to know them. But it can be off-putting and certainly a deterrent. Sometimes they don't want to go back to these classes when they feel like that stuff has come up and they've been disrespected in that way. There's a lot of potential grading issues, which is in a future slide, because I know that comes up a lot on campus, where the ones who are using VA benefits and GI Bill might have a different request for a faculty member in order to prevent a large debt with the VA. So I hope that that's something that can be discussed on campus, and policies can be put in place to sort of protect. What I usually say is be able to make an exception when it comes to this stuff, because it's not a traditional student situation. And even communicating with professors, again, you'd be surprised. These are adults who have been in, very intensive situations, but I have to encourage a lot of my vets to approach a professor about something that may be an issue or may be bothering them, because they feel like they're not supposed to. They're just supposed to kind of suck it up and do what they're told and not share maybe an issue that's happening, or something to do with having even to miss class for military orders. They don't approach the professors when they really should keep that line of communication open. I'm not going to go through these, but anyone who has questions about the VA benefits, I'm going to put up my contact information later, just to show you the variety of benefits that could be used. And this does not include state benefits and waivers. They're having to navigate sometimes choosing between one than the other, picking one first to maximize things. So it's not just as easy as here's your GI Bill, off you go. There's some red tape and some navigation of the VA benefits as well, which can be frustrating. So some best practices. Anyone working with veterans in an advising capacity probably already knows this, but the veterans themselves also need to know that choosing their major wisely is a big deal. Generally speaking, these benefits are time limited, 36 months, maybe up to 48, depending on a combination of benefits. 36 months is designed to get a 4-year degree, but if you change your major 3 times, or you're failing a bunch of classes and having to retake them, you're not going to get the degree within that time frame. And then I've worked with vets who have none left and no degree to show for it. And again, a lot of the eggs went into that basket, and things don't generally get better if we're not able to get them to the finish line with their degree completion. Classes have to count toward whatever major they're pursuing, or there's risk of not getting paid. That can be a disaster. I know over the past year and a half or so, we've had the COVID provision where they're supposed to take a class on campus, but everything's been online. That is ending in December. So it will be important that your student vets can find at least one class on campus. I know this has come up at CCCI, where there was a certain math class that was getting full and our vets couldn't register. So we actually created slots saved for vets in each section, so that we could always make sure we added the vets in so they could have an on-campus class. W grades, we call them withdrawal grades. I think they're called Z grades at 4Cs. This can be a giant disaster for vets using VA benefits. Sometimes it isn't in the student's best interest to withdraw from a class, but it has to be done with care and with some questioning. There are instances where staying in the class and failing might actually be better for that student. It's a conversation that should be had to weigh the pros and cons. If they're falling behind and an incomplete would be appropriate, that's usually my first recommendation if faculty is able to work with the student on that. But if they approach about receiving an F versus a Z grade, I always say, please refer them to the certifying official or the student veteran organization, someone who understands the ins and outs of that, the repercussions there. In some cases, they could, in a worst case scenario, they could end up with a debt to the VA and also to the school. I mean, thousands of dollars in many cases. And as you know, students can't pay those debts off. So if there's a hold on their account because they owe the school, $2,000, they're going to drop out. And again, the eggs are in that basket. If this is what's happening and they can't return to school, we failed our mission to help them succeed in this process. Tutoring and support services. This is something, again, underutilized for the most part, which is difficult. I've gotten creative with ways to present this information to the student veterans so that they're more inclined to seek it out. One of the things I love to do is create vet-to-vet tutoring. This can actually be a paid position. The VA will pay what they call a VA work study to tutor other vets, which is wonderful, so that there's not a disconnect. You know, if you send maybe a 35-year-old veteran man or woman to a 19-year-old who's really good at math, nothing against the 19-year-old who's good at math, but there tends to be a little bit of a disconnect and they maybe feel a little more embarrassed. But if you say, hey, I got this vet who works in the office, he's super good at math or chemistry, he can tutor you, or she can tutor you, that's a really nice connection. So you can pull from your dean's list of student vets and ask if anyone's interested in becoming a tutor. Again, they get paid by the VA. The school doesn't have to pay them anything. That's a really nice service to set up through the Veterans Office or through the certifying official, however you want to do it. I do put a lot of extra effort in connecting them to disability services for those in-class accommodations. They don't understand that unless you really break it down for them. They're not high school students who had an IEP and it's all familiar to them. You need to give them examples of how perhaps a student with PTSD would benefit from extra time on tests or private test taking area, preferential seating, the ability to record lectures because they have concentration difficulties. This is all really important stuff. So giving them concrete examples about what that service is and how to use it is really, really helpful. I think this is my last slide on best practices. Create a website that's user-friendly for the vets. I've heard from many service members who are still active duty that will say, hey, I was looking at schools in Rhode Island and this website had the best information, so I think I want to come here. They're looking at that stuff. When they Google a school and put in the school's name and Veterans Office, what comes up? Is it a point of contact or is it just sort of this black hole? Is there a name of a person? Do you have some resources on there? Does it say what to do when they're trying to register? That stuff's really meaningful, and it tells them when they're looking that they're not necessarily looking for that GI Bill friendly sticker. They've learned that that's not always the best indication. They're looking on the website to see what the school offers. I have a checklist that I use at my schools, and I'm happy to provide a template that goes through, you know, the reason I created it is because I'm not always there on campus every day. I'm a little bit all over the place. So the idea is that anyone could hand this checklist or email this checklist and say, here's something that can get you started. Kind of, you know, apply for your GI Bill. Here's the veteran worksheet. This is how you get certified. So just a little bit of information to help them organize the process. They like checklists. It's orderly and it helps them kind of move through the steps. Take a look at your transfer credit process for military credits. What does it look like? Is it decent? Could you do a better job collaborating with maybe some of the units that are around Cape Cod to see if they can directly link an MOS to some majors? That's super helpful. Create a veteran work group on campus. So some faculty and staff that are invested in providing better services. This is kind of where I start with a school that's just building up services to say, like, who cares about this? Who's invested in it? Is someone a military member themselves or a veteran themselves and they want to take an interest in this? Create that team and see what you guys can do to make services more stable and more useful to the student vets. And then get to know them. Part of what I hope you gathered from today is, if you don't know who student vets are in your class or on your campus, plug in, find out, like, how are they doing? Where are they struggling? Is the process going well? Great. Is there stuff that's a little bit more challenging? Is that grading policy that I mentioned, is that something that comes up as a challenge? If so, find out, and then find out how you can make things better, smoother, help them. Again, the end game is to get them through and help them graduate or transfer in your case. And then lastly, something that we've created recently is a veteran relief fund, which has been so unbelievably helpful for the little things that come up, throughout the semester, or even when someone's trying to register. Maybe they were a student at the school 10 years ago and they have a $300 balance and they can't pay it. Hey, we can use the relief fund to pay that off and get you registered for the semester. I'm always amazed by how quickly we go through the amount that we use every semester and how helpful it is to be able to access that fund specifically for our military students. So in closing, are you really thankful for what our service members have done? Are you showing that? Are you truly a veteran-friendly campus? Do you know the student vets? Do you know how they're struggling, if they're struggling, what's going well, what's not going well? And just, don't let them be anonymous. They're a wonderful asset to campus. They bring so many positives to the school and to groups and to classrooms with their experiences. So really value that and tap into it if you can. I highly recommend it. The better we do at this, the more vets that come to your campus, because they definitely talk to each other. So that's it. I think I did it within my time. This is me. Please feel free to write down my phone number and email. If there's anyone who's military connected in the audience that has questions about their benefits or needs more direct assistance, I'm happy to help anytime. Josh Maloney is my contact over there. So if you know him, he can always get you in touch with me as well. And I don't know if you want to do questions. I can't see the chat, but if there's.
Do we have a microphone on here?
We do, yep.
Hi, Micaela, can you
sit
hear
on
me?
this side.
I can, yes.
I can hear you.
Hold on a minute. Hello?
Try again, Josh.
Hello?
Michaela, can you hear Josh?
I can, yeah.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Well, first off, thank you so much for coming. Before we go over to some questions, I would really like to thank President Cox for starting this for us. I'd also like to thank our advisor, Dean McCarey, for helping me in so many ways and also helping this event so we can talk about veterans. Are there any questions right now for Micaela? Anything about the VA, anything about veterans? She is the most knowledgeable person I have ever met when it comes to veteran issues. I have a couple questions, but I do want to know. You know, these questions from inside the college that, hey, what could be interesting?
So, and it's about group work being prevalent. So, just when she's working with the veterans, what are her strategies? Because that can be for a couple, lots of different, but she's with the veterans product. What are some strategies that she recommends?
So Michaela, just so you can hear that again, what are some strategies that you recommend when working with students that might be struggling in the classroom for group work?
Oh, group work. Question. Yeah. I actually just did an event at another school and we had a panel of student veterans, and that was something that came up several times, that the student veterans felt like they were often the older students that nobody wanted to work with in the group, and they didn't understand why. They felt like it was just because they were older, and that group work was a little challenging for them because they struggle with, you know, people they don't know and maybe connecting with them, and they have different schedules. So if it's maybe younger students that are more on campus and available, their schedules conflicted a little bit. So I recognize that is a challenge. I'm trying to think if assigning groups, if you know the class well, maybe assigning groups might be better if you can connect people that are also adult learners to each other. I think that might be one of the things that came up a lot, was scheduling. But I also see the value in having the group work and having the veterans interact with the civilian students, the younger students, the non-veteran students, and getting to know them a little bit better. So I would ask too, group work's a challenge in general, I'm sure, because there's always someone that pulls more weight than someone else. And that's frustrating for the vets too, that if there's someone in the group who's not really pulling their weight. So I don't know if I have a best answer for you there, other than to maybe encourage assigning groups a little bit, so it's a better match for the personalities or the life circumstances of the individuals.
Hi, Michaela. Thank you for everything that you shared with us today. Can you describe some of the veteran training that has not typically gotten credit in college settings, that represents the best candidates for us to tackle in terms of ensuring that veterans get credit for as much as possible?
Oh, yes. Thank you. I love that question. I would say most of it, and you could take a pretty good deep dive into this. Most of their military training does not translate neatly over. And I know this is a hot topic, like colleges are going to be strict, especially like my counterparts in Texas and Florida, North Carolina, they've got these great transition, military credit transition calculators that take an MOS, which would be a military occupational specialty. They take an exact MOS and they plug it into a major. So if it's logistics, they might plug it into like a business management major. If they're medical, so they have fast tracks for like a combat medic going into nursing, would have like a fast track. Here's the credits you get. And you're not going to believe me, but there's a school in Rhode Island where the nursing students get points toward their nursing application, including transfer credits. They get X number of points for being a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, which is fine. I don't disagree with that. But they get 0 points for being a combat medic. 0. It makes no sense. And I've brought it to the school's attention multiple times. They have not budged. It's been years. So talk about saying we don't care about that, where one would argue a combat medic is highly trained, especially if they've been in the military for a while, versus a CNA, which is a quick certificate training, right? So most of them get elective credits for their military experience. And I mean, I've worked with a Navy chief who was in for 20 years. His transcripts were like this, and he got elective credits and maybe 10 other military credits. So what I had him do was go to the department chair and say, hey, let me explain to you what this means. I taught this class. I don't think I need to take a communications class. Could you maybe substitute? And the department chair ultimately did do that. But it took that veteran taking the next step, which not all of them know they can do or are willing to do. So my advice is, and we've tried to work on this in Rhode Island several times, what the easiest thing to do is you could take the Air Force Base out there and go to them and say, what are your most common occupations? Can we have some information on that? And try to line it up so that it actually translates into, all right, this particular training they did equals, business 101. Or so it's a cleaner transfer and it's already outlined. At some schools that do a good job with this, an incoming military student could go to the website of the school before they even apply and find out which military credits are likely to transfer, so that they come in with a leg up. Most of our vets, this is across New England, most of them get very little for their military transcripts at all, whether they were in for 4 years, 10, 20. I mean, it's really, and again, what message does that send? It says, we don't really understand this. We don't value it. Just come and take your college classes, please. So I hope that answers your question. I was a little bit on my soapbox, but I could go on and on about that.
I think I could talk for a quick moment about that. I was in for over 10 years. I was a drill sergeant. I haven't received any credit for anything. I don't expect to, because this is just what college is nowadays. I went to McCarey, I went here, I'm not expecting, which is sad. But it is. Micaela, one more question. Again, thank you so much. Incredible. How educated would you say your average veteran is? Maybe just got out of the service, knows everything about the GI Bill, ready to come use their service. They show up at Cape Cod Community College and say, I am ready, I know everything. How accurate, are there misconceptions? Are they ever wrong? Do veterans sometimes know wrong things? Do we share wrong information?
Yes. I can answer this directly because I've been on campus for over 12 years. And I also, part of my job is to work with discharging service members who are discharging for medical reasons. Even the information they get during the discharge process from DOD can be incorrect. And I work for the VA, so I understand why this happens. Regulations change, programs are misunderstood. So especially at the community college level, where they're most likely, this is their first stop. Sometimes my vets who are transferring to a 4-year school have a better hold on things. My vets that I'm working with at the Community College of Rhode Island are very much blank slate, and they're overwhelmed. And if they know something, they probably don't know how to maximize their benefits. And I say that because I'm very passionate about making sure these are earned benefits. They served the country. They knew what was at risk. Sometimes a lot of bad things happened. Now they're coming out and they have this earned benefit. It is my job. It is our job to help them use those effectively. And that means maximizing them. It means if you should use one first and that's going to get you 48 months versus 36, that matters. If it means one's going to pay you at a 50% rate and one's going to pay you at 100%, that matters. So yeah, there can be some bobbles. There's even choices they can make that can be detrimental, picking one benefit and relinquishing one by accident. And now they're locked into that decision. So it really matters to have good information, accurate information, and like a seamless process, or as seamless as possible, that outlines like, these are the things you need to do in order to get paid on time. Every school operates a little differently with their certification process. Be sure that they know that so that they're doing their part to follow the steps. So yes, Josh, I at my community college, I would say very few come in with confidence about exactly what they're supposed to do and how to set everything up. So they're relying on the school to help them navigate that.
Anybody knew, Micaela gave a similar presentation a year ago. And it was equally as tremendous. In the middle of COVID, she came, tele-zoomed in and talked to us about this stuff. And we're happy that we get to do this year more in person. We have, people in chairs. It's fantastic. The veterans, student veterans of America, actually, Cape Cod Community College, get better over the years. It's going to get better. We have another event coming up today at 1:30. A certified dog trainer, Matt Maloney, will be talking about veterans and service dogs and how that relationship can be helped. Micaela, I cannot thank you enough for the second year in a row. I'm proud to say I will be going to Mass Maritime next year. Cape Cod has helped me go there. Proud to be bringing the skills I learned here, working with Micaela, working with the administration, starting a club like this stuff, and go to another college and start it up there. Cape Cod is not alone. This stuff is difficult. Veterans, it's difficult when we serve. It's difficult now. It's difficult dealing with us. It's difficult feeling what we deserve and what we don't deserve and what we get and what we don't get. All I can do is truly thank you all for coming and listening. Gary, round of applause for Micaela, please.
Thank you, everyone. I promise I'll be there in person if we do this again.
And we're gonna go black until 1:30, so there'll be a nice little pretty screen up, but other than that,